2020 and 2021 have seen an incredible global shift as the world deals with the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has changed the lives of people all over the world and has certainly changed ours here at Government House. But this is not the first time a global pandemic has affected life here. The Spanish flu was first identified in the United States in March 1918, and while its origin is still unknown, it quickly swept around the world. First reported in a First World War military base in Kansas, the crowded and often dirty conditions of the First World War meant the virus quickly traveled through the troops. The troops themselves spread it as they traveled through the different theaters of war. Spanish flu arrived in Canada in July 1918 in the port cities of Quebec City, Montreal, and Halifax, brought by returning soldiers. The Spanish flu was first identified in Saskatchewan in October 1918 and impacted many aspects of daily life for everyone in the province, including those living at Government House. Just like today, the Spanish flu in Saskatchewan meant many different regular activities had to be altered or stopped altogether. For example, the courts in Regina, Moose Jaw, and Saskatoon had to be suspended. Some communities in the province implemented new, shortened business hours, and some businesses were fined for violating curfew. Emergency hospitals were opened, sometimes in hotels or schools. Schools, churches, pool halls, and theaters were closed in different parts of the province, with people reading religious sermons from newspapers. Public streetcars were disinfected. Different committee and group meetings and events were postponed or cancelled altogether. In fact, so many events were postponed and cancelled due to the pandemic, one newspaper notice simply says, "The rummage sale, advertised for tomorrow by the Westminster Women's Guild, has been indefinitely postponed for the same reason that other gatherings have been cancelled." In 2020 and 2021, the people of Saskatchewan, Canada, and around the world have dealt with the closure of businesses and schools, recreation centres, and limits on gatherings. Many people have been tasked with quickly mastering video conferencing as we have tried to remain connected both professionally and personally using modern technology, including how we here at Government House are speaking to you today. Events at Government House itself had to be curtailed due to the virus, because of the Spanish flu actually being at Government House. On the 16th of January, a notice was put in the Leader Post which reads, "Masters Harry and John Lake are recovering from serious attacks of influenza. 2 of the 4 children of Sir Richard and Lady Lake, they managed to recover from the virus, and there is no indication the boys transmitted it to their sister or baby brother, the only child born at Government House the September before, or to their parents." On the 17th of January, the Leader Post reported that Sir Richard Lake, President of the Provincial Red Cross Society, yesterday expressed his disappointment that, owing to sickness in his home, the plans which Lady Lake had made for holding a reception at Government House in compliment to the delegates of the annual meeting had to be cancelled. He referred to the pleasure it had given to Lady Lake and himself to have the delegates spend an hour at their home last year, and they had looked forward to having similar pleasures yesterday. But this was made impossible by the illness of their little sons. Further, on the 21st of January 1919, a notice was put in the Leader Post reading, "Owing to the fact that there are cases of influenza at Government House, it has been found necessary to postpone Lady Lake's At Home, for which invitations have been issued for Thursday, January 23rd. Just like in 1918 and 1919, we here at Government House today have had to close our doors to visitors. We are fortunate to have modern technology to enable us to allow you to visit Government House digitally until we are safely able to welcome you back. In late 1918, rural farms and homesteads were physically isolated, just as they are today in Saskatchewan. One big difference, though, between living on a farm in 1918 or 1919 versus 2021 is the improvement of our communications network. By the end of 1912, a long-distance network servicing all major centres in the province was in place, with some 3,170 miles of long-distance pole lines carrying over 11,850 miles of wire. But this did not mean all or even many farms had access to telephones. Mail was the most widespread communication method, but that could be disrupted by weather and illness as well. While in 2021, physical mail delivery is still a mainstay during the pandemic, bringing us, among other things, our online purchases, it is hardly the lifeline it was to so many people living on farms in 1918 and 1919. Neighbors and medical help could be a long walk or horse or wagon ride away. In 2021, the ability to have a phone, even a landline or GPS phone, is widely available to most people living in Saskatchewan. Many people living in farms flocked to towns and cities to be nearer neighbors and family and any possible medical help during the Spanish flu. However, cities, towns, and villages were not safe havens, and indeed many people may have been safer staying on their farms due to the crowded conditions. To quote, Saskatoon's medical health officer, Arthur Wilson, traveled to the American Public Health Association meeting in Chicago in mid-October 1918 to learn the latest American methods to fight the virus. On Wilson's advice, Saskatoonians were warned to keep healthy through regular work, rest, and play. They were told to avoid crowds and other people and to sleep and work with the windows wide open. In 1918, 13% of Saskatchewan's population lived in cities, whereas 86.98% lived rurally, including towns, villages, and rural municipalities. There were 1,162 hospital beds in cities, equaling 10.8 beds for every 1,000 people, whereas there were 608 hospital beds to serve rural Saskatchewan, which equals 0.8 bed per every 1,000 people. To quote, in Saskatchewan cities where medical attendance was available, the death rate was 6.6 deaths per 1,000 population. But in rural municipalities and villages, the least likely to have medical attendance, the rate was nearly twice the provincial rate, or 10.5 per 1,000. In 1918, there were reports that some people in rural areas had unfortunately passed away from the Spanish flu, but had not been discovered quickly. This led the provincial government to encourage neighbours and friends to look in on and out for one another. On the 6th of November 1918, the provincial government called on Sir Richard Lake to issue a proclamation to the people of Saskatchewan. The proclamation read, in part, Now know ye that by and with the advice of our Executive Council, we do by this, our proclamation, call upon the people of our province of Saskatchewan, 1. To call upon their neighbours frequently while the epidemic lasts. 2. To render such assistance as they are able. 3. To report to the proper authorities in their districts cases of illness discovered. 4. And in general to cooperate in every way possible to combat the ravages of the epidemic which has already caused such widespread suffering and sorrow in our province. Our provincial government and federal government have both released public health orders or suggested measures to help impede the spread of COVID-19. Measures put out by the Saskatchewan Health Authority include limiting the number of close contacts we have and wearing masks while out in public. Businesses have been asked to lower capacity, and people who have been exposed or who have contracted COVID-19 are asked to self-isolate. As case numbers rise and fall, we are experiencing various restrictions similar to what was experienced in 1918 and 1919. Both the provincial and federal government have also encouraged citizens to support and reach out to each other. In his November 2020 throne speech, His Honour Russell Morasty, current Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan, said, in part, Thank you to the people of Saskatchewan for working together to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, our best defense has been the selflessness and the vigilance of Saskatchewan people in following the good practices that protect themselves and others. We know this to be true about the province we love. Saskatchewan is strong. Saskatchewan people are tough and resilient. We are steadfast and determined. We are compassionate and generous. We put others ahead of ourselves. We care for each other, come what may. This is our province. This is who we are. Inclined to hope, optimistic by nature. This is how we have overcome adversity before, and it is how, together, we will do so again. We will prevail in Saskatchewan. We will get through this stronger than ever. The Spanish flu was responsible for between 40 and 50 million deaths worldwide and 55,000 in Canada, of which approximately 5,000 were from Saskatchewan. This equals 0.61% of the population of Saskatchewan at the time. There was no part of the province left untouched. As Sir Richard Lake's statement from 1918 reads, "In view of the serious nature of the influenza epidemic now prevailing in all parts of the province and the extreme difficulty which is being encountered in endeavoring to locate and keep track of cases of illness, it is essential that all citizens of the province should assist by every means in their power to prevent the further spread of this dangerous disease and to render such aid as they can to persons already afflicted." This announcement sounds familiar to a Saskatchewan Health Authority media release 102 years later, from November 2019, which read, in part, "COVID-19 is everywhere in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's medical health officers are asking all Saskatchewan residents to self-monitor for COVID symptoms, regardless of where you live in this province." During both pandemics, the people of Saskatchewan have come together to support each other, including medical professionals, volunteers, religious leaders, and everyday citizens of Saskatchewan doing their part to suppress the virus. While it is impossible to know when the COVID-19 pandemic will end in Saskatchewan, we are looking forward to safely welcoming back people to Government House.
Hello, and welcome to Government House.